I'm Lawrence, 33 years old, a successful software designer with a complicated family history. My relationship with my younger sister Amber and my mother Barbara has always been strained. Last month I received a text from Mom that broke the camel's back. Your sister's having second thoughts about inviting you. You should offer to pay for her dream car to make her feel better. My one-word reply was, understood. Then I canceled her wedding venue, citing manipulation as the reason. The non-refundable deposit was all in her name. If you've ever been taken advantage of by family, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button as I share how I finally stood up for myself. Growing up in our modest suburban home in Portland, the dynamics in our family were always skewed. From as early as I can remember, there was a clear favorite in my mother's eyes, and it wasn't me. My younger sister Amber, 4 years my junior, was the apple of Mom's eye. Where I was expected to excel without praise, Amber was celebrated for the smallest achievements. Where I was criticized for minor mistakes, Amber was gently guided and forgiven. Dad was different. He treated us equally, encouraging both of us to pursue our interests and develop our unique talents. He worked hard as an engineer at a local manufacturing company, often putting in overtime to ensure we had everything we needed. I remember him teaching me how to build my first computer when I was 12, his patience never wavering as I fumbled with components. Those moments with Dad were precious islands of normalcy in our otherwise unbalanced family life. Everything changed when I was 16. Dad suffered a sudden heart attack and passed away within hours. The loss was devastating for all of us, but it affected our family in different ways. Mom retreated into a shell of grief that somehow amplified her favoritism toward Amber. I lost not only my father but also my buffer against the unequal treatment at home. Dad left us with a life insurance policy and college funds for both Amber and me. Mom was appointed as the trustee until we turned 21. Looking back, the signs of financial manipulation started then. When I needed money for science camp, I was told the funds were tight and I should find a summer job instead. Yet when Amber wanted an expensive prom dress or a trip to visit cousins, the money was always available. By the time I graduated high school, I had developed a fierce independence born of necessity. I had saved almost $7,000 from part-time jobs at the local electronics store and doing computer repairs for neighbors. This money, combined with scholarships and student loans, allowed me to attend a state university 300 miles away from home. The distance was both physical and emotional, and while I never admitted it to anyone, it was intentional. College was liberating. I thrived in the computer science program, securing internships each summer that paid well enough that I rarely had to ask Mom for money from my college fund. When I did inquire about the balance during my junior year, Mom's vague answers raised red flags, but I was too busy with school to investigate further. After graduation, I landed a job at a promising tech startup in Seattle. The work was demanding, but rewarding, and my career trajectory accelerated faster than I had dared to hope. By 27, I had moved to a senior position with a substantial salary increase. At 30, I was heading a design team for innovative software applications. Financial security came with hard work, smart investments, and careful budgeting. Meanwhile, Amber's path was very different. She changed majors 3 times in college, before settling on communications, taking 5.5 years to graduate. Throughout this time, Mom never questioned her expenses or pushed her toward financial independence. After college, Amber bounced between jobs, always finding reasons why each position wasn't right for her. She lived at home with Mom, contributing minimally to household expenses. The pattern of financial demands started shortly after I achieved some success. First, it was loans that were never repaid for Amber's car repairs or security deposits on apartments she would vacate within months. Then came requests to help out with Amber's credit card debt that had spiraled out of control. Each time, Mom was the messenger, calling me with emotional pleas about how stressed Amber was and how, as her successful brother, I should want to help. For years, I gave in, partly out of guilt, partly hoping that each time would be the last. But as the requests became more frequent and the amounts larger, I began setting boundaries. I offered to help Amber create a budget, suggested financial counseling, and even proposed paying for courses that could lead to better job prospects. These offers were met with offense and accusations that I was being condescending and didn't understand her situation. The tension reached a breaking point 3 years ago when I refused to co-sign a loan for Amber's dream car, a luxury vehicle that was well beyond her means. Mom didn't speak to me for 2 months after that decision, and holiday gatherings became exercises in passive-aggressive comments and uncomfortable silences. Then Jason entered the picture. Amber met him at a charity gala she had attended with a friend who worked for the organizing foundation. Jason was 36, financially successful from his family's real estate business, and according to Amber, completely smitten with her from their first dance. Their whirlwind romance progressed quickly, with a proposal coming just 8 months after they met. I met Jason only twice before the engagement. He seemed nice enough, polite, well-dressed, and clearly infatuated with Amber. But something about the relationship nagged at me. Perhaps it was the way Amber emphasized his wealth in every conversation, or how she suddenly adopted interests that aligned perfectly with his. I kept my reservations to myself, partly because I knew they wouldn't be welcomed, and partly because I hoped my instincts were wrong. After all, who was I to judge when my own relationship history consisted of a series of short-term connections that fizzled under the demands of my work schedule? When Amber called to announce their engagement, her excitement seemed genuine. But it didn't take long for the conversation to turn to money. The wedding they were planning would be the event of the season, and naturally, as her only brother, I would want to contribute generously to make her special day perfect. That was the moment I realized that in Amber's eyes, and by extension Mom's, my primary value to the family had become financial. The official announcement of Amber and Jason's engagement came via an elaborate card with gold foil lettering and a professional photograph of the couple gazing adoringly at each other against a sunset backdrop. The Save the Date card indicated a June wedding 18 months away at one of the most exclusive venues in the Pacific Northwest. A historic chateau with sweeping ocean views that typically booked 2 years in advance. A week after receiving the announcement, Amber called me. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, she got to the point. "So Lawrence, Jason and I have been going over the wedding budget," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of forced casualness that always preceded a financial request. "Since you're my only brother, we were hoping you would cover the cost of the venue. It would mean so much to me." I nearly choked on my coffee. The Chateau Amber, that place costs a fortune. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. "Well, you're doing so well with your job," she countered. "And this is my wedding day. Don't you want it to be special?" "Of course I want your day to be special," I replied carefully. "But that's an unreasonable amount to ask anyone to contribute. I'm happy to help with something more reasonable. Maybe the photography, or the flowers." The conversation quickly deteriorated. Amber's voice rose as she accused me of being selfish and uncaring. "I knew you'd be like this. You never support me when it really matters." "That's not fair, Amber. I've helped you many times over the years." "Well, if you're going to be so stingy, maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding at all," she snapped before hanging up. I sat in stunned silence, staring at my phone. This was a new low even for our strained relationship. I had expected some unreasonable financial requests related to the wedding, but being threatened with exclusion from the event entirely was a shock. True to form, Mom called the next day. Her voice was tight with disapproval. "Lawrence, I can't believe how you spoke to your sister yesterday. She was in tears all evening. Mom, she asked me to pay for the entire venue. Do you have any idea how much that costs?" "It's her wedding day, Lawrence, the most important day of her life. As her brother, you should want to make it special for her." I offered to pay for other aspects of the wedding, I explained, feeling like I was defending myself to a hostile jury. "But the venue is way beyond what anyone should expect a sibling to cover." Mom sighed heavily. "You've always been so selfish when it comes to your sister. Jason's family is contributing generously. Why can't you do the same? Have you asked Jason about this? Does he know Amber is asking me to pay for the venue?" There was a telling pause. Jason is very busy with work. Amber is handling most of the wedding planning. That struck me as odd. In my limited interactions with Jason, he had seemed like someone who would want to be involved in planning his own wedding, especially considering the financial implications. The conversation ended with Mom making a thinly veiled threat similar to Amber's that my refusal to pay might result in not being invited to the wedding. 2 weeks later, I received a text from Amber: lunch on Saturday, need to discuss wedding details. I agreed, suggesting a modest bistro near my apartment. To my surprise, when I arrived, both Amber and Mom were waiting. It felt like an ambush, and my suspicions were confirmed when they immediately launched into a detailed breakdown of the wedding costs, complete with a spreadsheet that Mom had printed out. As you can see, Amber explained, pointing to various figures, we've already secured most of the vendors. The venue requires the largest deposit, which is due next month. I glanced over the numbers, my eyebrows rising involuntarily. This is a $300,000 wedding, Amber. That's excessive. Amber rolled her eyes. It's not excessive for someone of Jason's status. His business associates and family expect a certain level of sophistication. And what does Jason think about these costs? I asked carefully. He wants me to have whatever makes me happy. Amber replied with a dismissive wave. He's given me a budget to work with. Then why are you asking me to cover the venue if Jason has provided a budget? Mom interjected. Because Jason's already covering so much. It's only fair that our side of the family contributes significantly. As they continued to outline their expectations, not just the venue but now also mentioning the rehearsal dinner, a welcome party for out-of-town guests, and a post-wedding brunch, I felt increasingly like I was viewed as nothing more than a financial resource. There was no discussion of my role as a brother, no questions about my life or work, not even a cursory inquiry about whether I might want to bring a date to the wedding. After an hour of this, I excused myself, claiming a work emergency. As I walked back to my car, I made a decision. I would reach out to Jason directly. If he truly didn't know about these financial demands, he deserved to be informed. And if he did know, then I needed to understand exactly what kind of man my sister was marrying. I found Jason's contact information through some mutual connections and invited him for a drink, positioning it as a chance for the future brothers-in-law to get to know each other better. He seemed genuinely pleased by the invitation and suggested a craft brewery the following evening. Jason turned out to be more down-to-earth than I had expected. He spoke passionately about his work in real estate development, particularly his interest in sustainable building practices. When I carefully steered the conversation toward wedding planning, his response was revealing. Honestly, I'm not too involved in the details, he admitted. I told Amber I'd like to keep the guest list to around 100 people, but she insisted we needed at least 250 to include all her friends and extended family. I gave her a budget of $150,000, which seemed more than generous to me. My first wedding was a simple affair at the courthouse, followed by dinner with close friends. But Amber wants something more elaborate. I nearly spat out my beer. $150,000. And she's still asking family members to contribute. Jason's brow furrowed. What do you mean? What contributions? The look of genuine confusion on his face told me everything I needed to know. I carefully explained that Amber had asked me to cover the venue costs, positioned as the family's contribution to the wedding. That doesn't make sense, Jason said slowly. The venue is already included in the budget I gave her. In fact, she told me last week that she'd put down the deposit. We spent the next hour comparing notes, and a disturbing picture emerged. Amber had been telling Jason that certain expenses were being covered by family contributions, while simultaneously asking me to pay for items that Jason believed were already accounted for in his budget. It was a shell game, designed to extract maximum financial benefit from both of us. Despite this troubling revelation, I still received a formal wedding invitation the following month. I suspected this was more about appearances than any genuine desire to have me present. After all, how would it look to Jason's family and friends if the bride's only brother was absent? The months following the wedding invitation were marked by an increasing frequency of financial demands disguised as wedding-related necessities. What started as requests for the venue quickly expanded to include expectations for other traditional brother-of-the-bride responsibilities that seemed to multiply with each conversation. One Tuesday evening in early February, I received a call from Amber while I was working late at the office. "Lawrence, I need to talk to you about something important." She began, her voice carrying that familiar tone of practiced sweetness that always preceded a request. "What's up?" I asked, saving my work and bracing myself. "Well, Jason and I were talking about wedding transportation, and we think it would be really special if I arrived in my dream car. You know, the silver Audi A7. I've wanted forever." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "You want to rent an Audi for the wedding day?" "Not rent, Lawrence," she corrected, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Buy. As my wedding gift from you." The audacity left me momentarily speechless. "Amber, that's a $60,000 car." "68,000, with the features I want," she corrected casually. "But you're doing so well financially. And what better way to show your support for my marriage? Plus, it would make for amazing wedding photos." "That's completely unreasonable," I said firmly. "I'm happy to give you a generous wedding gift, but it won't be a luxury vehicle." "God, you're so stingy," she snapped, her sweet demeanor evaporating instantly. "Anyone would think you were struggling financially instead of being a senior designer at a major tech company." "It's not about what I can afford, Amber. It's about appropriate boundaries. No one should expect their sibling to buy them a luxury car as a wedding gift." "Jason's brother is gifting us our honeymoon at a 5-star resort in Bali," she countered accusingly. "Is he really?" "Have you confirmed that with Jason?" I asked, remembering our previous conversation where Jason had mentioned booking the honeymoon himself. There was a telling pause before Amber huffed. "I don't have to justify myself to you. Either you want to be part of my special day and contribute appropriately, or you don't." The call ended with another threat about reconsidering my invitation to the wedding. This was becoming a familiar refrain, but it still stung each time. The fallout from these refusals extended beyond just Amber and Mom. Somehow the narrative that I was being stingy and unsupportive had spread to extended family members. Aunt Patricia, who I'd always been close to, called to gently suggest that I should be more generous considering your circumstances. Uncle Robert sent an email expressing disappointment in my lack of family values. Even cousins I rarely spoke with sent messages on social media asking why I was making things difficult for Amber. It was clear that Amber and Mom had been spreading a very one-sided version of events throughout the family. No one seemed to know or care about the thousands of dollars I had already given Amber over the years, or the fact that the current requests were wildly inappropriate. What troubled me most was that this campaign to paint me as the villain coincided with discoveries I was making about Amber's actual financial situation. Through casual conversations with mutual acquaintances and some subtle social media investigations, I learned that Amber had recently been promoted at her marketing firm to a senior position with a substantial salary increase. Additionally, she had posted photos of a weekend shopping spree where she'd purchased designer items worth thousands of dollars, all while pleading financial hardship to me. When I tried to discuss these discoveries with Mom during our monthly phone call, she dismissed them entirely. "Your sister works hard and deserves to treat herself occasionally," Mom said defensively. "That doesn't change the fact that a wedding is an enormous expense, and family should help. Mom, she and Jason have the means to pay for the wedding they're planning. These requests aren't about need. They're about taking advantage." "Taking advantage?" Mom's voice rose sharply. "How dare you suggest such a thing? Your sister has always looked up to you, and this is how you speak about her." The conversation deteriorated from there, with Mom eventually hanging up after declaring that I had changed and become cold and calculating since moving away and finding success. 2 days later, I received the text message that would prove to be the tipping point in our family dynamic. It arrived at 6:15 in the morning, clearly sent in the heat of emotion rather than after careful consideration. "Your sister's having second thoughts about inviting you. You should offer to pay for her dream car to make her feel better. It's the least you can do after all the stress you've caused her during wedding planning." I stared at the message for a long time, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just another attempt at financial manipulation. It was a blatant effort to use my place in the family as leverage. The message crystallized something I had been feeling but hadn't fully acknowledged in their eyes. My value was measured purely in dollars and cents, not in love or familial bonds. As I sat there, coffee growing cold beside me, I made a decision. This pattern had to end, and I would be the one to end it. But I needed information first. Through a mutual friend who was helping with wedding planning, I discreetly obtained copies of some of the vendor contracts. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions. All services, including the venue, were booked in Amber's name alone, not jointly with Jason. The deposits had been paid substantial, non-refundable amounts that would be forfeited if the services were canceled. Most interesting was a clause in the venue contract regarding cancellations. In most cases, deposits were non-refundable, but there was a specific provision that if the cancellation was due to coercion, manipulation, or fraud by any party involved in the wedding, the venue would consider refunding a portion of the deposit after an investigation. With this information in hand, I formulated my response to Mom's text. It would be just one word, but it would set in motion a series of events that would change our family forever. Understood. That single word reply to Mom's text, understood, bought me the time I needed to execute my plan. I knew that she would interpret it as compliance, as she always had before when I eventually gave in to her and Amber's demands. But this time would be different. The first step was to call Jason. I owed him that much, given what I was about to do. I caught him during his lunch break, and his tone was friendly but slightly guarded. "Jason, I need to talk to you about something important regarding the wedding," I began. "Is this about the car Amber mentioned you might be getting her something special?" The implication that I had agreed to purchase the Audi confirmed my suspicions about how my text response had been interpreted. Actually, no. It's about the overall wedding finances and some concerns I have. What kind of concerns? His voice took on a more serious tone. I've discovered that Amber has been systematically misleading both of us about who is paying for what. She's told you that certain expenses are being covered by family contributions, while simultaneously telling me that you're expecting me to pay for things you've already budgeted for. There was a long pause. That's a serious accusation, Lawrence. I know, and I wouldn't make it without evidence. I proceeded to detail everything I had learned, including the venue deposit that Jason thought was covered by his budget, but that Amber had been pressuring me to pay. "Why would she do this?" Jason asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and distress. "I believe she's trying to extract maximum financial benefit from both of us." "This isn't new behavior, Jason. I've been dealing with similar patterns for years, just on a smaller scale." "What about the car?" "She told me it was your idea to buy her the Audi as a wedding gift, that you insisted on it." That revelation stung. I never offered any such thing. In fact, I explicitly refused when she asked. Our conversation continued for nearly an hour as we compared notes on various financial discussions with Amber. A disturbing picture emerged of systematic deception designed to maximize what she could extract from both of us. Jason was particularly troubled by the discovery that Amber had been using his credit card for numerous wedding expenses that she'd told him were being covered by my generous contributions. "I need to talk to her about this," Jason said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I understand. But before you do, you should know what I'm planning to do." I explained my intention to contact the wedding venue and cancel the reservation, citing the manipulation clause in the contract. I made it clear that I had evidence of Amber's deceptive behavior regarding the venue payment. "That's extreme," Jason said after a pause. "It is," I acknowledged. "But this pattern needs to stop. And frankly, Jason, you might want to reconsider whether this marriage is a good idea. Financial deception at this level doesn't bode well for your future together." After ending the call with Jason, I took a deep breath and made the call to the chateau. I asked to speak with the event manager, and once connected, explained the situation as clearly and objectively as I could. I detailed how the bride had been attempting to manipulate both her fiancé and her brother into paying for the venue separately, providing copies of text messages and emails as evidence. The manager, a woman named Margaret with over 20 years in the wedding industry, listened attentively. "Unfortunately, Mr. Wilson, we see this type of situation more often than you might expect. While we normally have a strict no-refund policy on deposits, our manipulation clause exists for precisely these scenarios. I'll need to review the evidence you've provided with our legal team, but based on what you've shared, there appears to be clear manipulation involved." "What happens next?" I asked. "We'll conduct our review, which typically takes 3 to 5 business days. If we determine that the clause applies, we'll cancel the reservation and may refund a portion of the deposit, though that decision is at management's discretion. Either way, the date will be released back into our calendar. And the deposit that's already been paid, I believe it was $25,000. That was indeed the amount. As I mentioned, if the cancellation is approved under the manipulation clause, a portion may be refunded. However, that refund would go to the person who made the payment. In this case, Miss Prating/, Amber Wilson. I understand, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The goal wasn't to recoup the money, but to end the manipulation. After completing the call, I drafted a simple email to Amber, with Mom and Jason copied. Amber, I've spoken with the chateau regarding your wedding reservation. Based on the pattern of manipulation surrounding the venue payment, I've provided them with evidence under their coercion manipulation or fraud clause. They'll be reviewing the situation and will contact you directly regarding cancellation of the reservation. I want to be clear that this action comes after years of financial manipulation and emotional blackmail. The text I received from Mom this morning threatening my exclusion from your wedding unless I purchased you a $68,000 car was the final straw. Lawrence. I hesitated before hitting send, questioning whether this was too extreme a response. But then I remembered all the years of being treated like an ATM rather than a brother. All the emotional manipulation, all the lies. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally establishing boundaries that should have been in place long ago. I pressed send and then turned off my phone. I knew the response would be immediate and volatile, and I needed time to prepare myself for the fallout. When I turned my phone back on 4 hours later, the expected deluge awaited me. 17 missed calls from Amber, 12 from Mom, 3 voicemails from each filled with shouting and threats, and dozens of text messages ranging from furious accusations to teary pleas to fix the situation. The most telling message was from Jason: "We need to talk." This is bigger than I thought. I barely had time to process the barrage of messages before my apartment buzzer sounded incessantly. Through the intercom, I heard Amber's voice shrill with fury. "Open this door right now, Lawrence. I know you're in there." Part of me wanted to ignore her, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. Better to have it on my terms in my space than to prolong the inevitable. I buzzed her in. When I opened my apartment door, Amber stormed past me, her face flushed with anger, her designer handbag swinging wildly from her arm. She spun to face me as soon as she reached my living room. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice breaking with emotion. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "The venue called me. They're canceling everything." I closed the door calmly and walked past her to sit on my couch. "I know exactly what I've done, Amber. I've ended a pattern of manipulation that's gone on far too long." "Manipulation," she sputtered. "You're my brother. You're supposed to help me. This is my wedding we're talking about." "Help you?" "Yes. Be extorted by you." "No. There's a difference." "Extorted. That's ridiculous. I just asked you to contribute to my special day. You asked me to pay for the venue that Jason had already budgeted for. You asked me to buy you a $68,000 car. And when I refused, Mom threatened that I wouldn't be invited to the wedding. That's not asking for a contribution. That's manipulation. You don't understand anything." Tears were streaming down her face now, but I recognized them as tears of frustration rather than genuine sorrow. The deposit for the venue was $25,000. Non-refundable. Do you know what that means? I do. It means you're out $25,000 that you paid using Jason's credit card while telling him that I was covering the venue. It means there are consequences for deception. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, confirming my suspicion. "How do you know whose card I used?" "Jason and I have been talking. We've been comparing notes on your version of events. The stories don't match up, Amber." The color drained from her face. "You had no right to talk to Jason about our financial arrangements. Actually, I had every right to clear up the deliberate confusion you created. You told him I was buying you the Audi as a wedding gift when in reality you demanded it. and I refused. It's not like that she insisted, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. This wedding has to be perfect. Jason's family expects it. Jason's family expects a wedding that costs $300,000. Somehow I doubt that. Before Amber could respond, there was another buzz from the intercom. This time it was Jason. I let him in without hesitation. When Jason entered the apartment, the tension was palpable. He looked between Amber and me, his expression grave. I think we all need to talk, he said quietly. Amber rushed to him, tears flowing freely now. Jason Lawrence has done something terrible. He's canceled our venue. The deposit is gone. Jason gently disentangled himself from her embrace. I know. I spoke with him earlier today. What I want to understand is why you've been lying to both of us about the wedding finances. Amber's expression froze. What are you talking about? You told me Lawrence was covering the venue when you knew he wasn't. You charged the deposit to my credit card without telling me. You told Lawrence I expected him to pay for things that were already in our budget. Jason's voice was steady but tinged with disappointment. Why would you do that, Amber? That's not. I didn't, she stammered, looking frantically between us. It's just a misunderstanding. Wedding planning is complicated, and sometimes wires get crossed. This wasn't crossed wires, I interjected. This was a deliberate attempt to double-dip financially. The apartment buzzer sounded again. This time it was Mom. When she entered, she immediately moved to Amber's side, putting an arm around her shoulders protectively. What have you done, Lawrence? Mom demanded, her eyes narrowed with accusation. Your sister is devastated. I've put an end to years of financial manipulation, I replied evenly. And now we're having an honest conversation about it. Financial manipulation. That's absurd. We're family. Family helps each other. Mrs. Wilson. Jason interrupted, his tone, respectful but firm. I'm concerned about some discrepancies in what Amber has told each of us about the wedding finances. It appears she's been less than truthful with both Lawrence and me. Mom's expression faltered briefly before she regained her composure. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Amber has been under tremendous stress planning this wedding. It's not a misunderstanding, I said, walking to my desk where I'd prepared for this moment. I returned with a folder containing printed emails, text messages, and financial records. These are just from the past 2 years. Requests for money. Emotional manipulation. When I refused lies about what the money was actually used for. I spread the documents on the coffee table. Here's a text asking me for $3,000 for emergency car repairs last year. Here's a receipt showing that Amber actually spent that money on a weekend spa trip with her friends. Here's an email claiming she needed help with rent after losing her job when in fact she'd received a promotion and salary increase. You've been spying on me, Amber gasped. No. I've been connecting dots after years of inconsistencies, and now with the wedding you've escalated to a whole new level of deception. Jason picked up one of the documents, reading it with a deepening frown. Amber, is this true? Did you really tell Lawrence you needed money for dental work when you actually got Botox treatments? That's private, she snapped, trying to snatch the paper from his hand. Not when you asked your brother to pay for it under false pretenses, Jason replied, his voice hardening. As we continued to go through the evidence, Jason's expression grew increasingly troubled. He asked pointed questions about various financial discrepancies, and with each fumbling explanation from Amber, I could see his trust in her eroding. Mom, for her part, vacillated between defending Amber and looking genuinely shocked at some of the revelations. When we reached the text she had sent me that morning about the car, her defense weakened. I was just trying to help smooth things over, she insisted weakly. Amber was upset about the wedding planning. And I thought, you thought threatening to exclude me from my sister's wedding unless I bought her a luxury car was smoothing things over? I asked incredulously. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible, Mom admitted reluctantly. It is terrible, Jason said firmly. It's manipulative and wrong. As the evidence mounted, the dynamics in the room shifted. Jason's disappointment in Amber was evident. And even Mom seemed to be reconsidering her position, though she continued to sit protectively beside Amber. The confrontation reached its climax when Jason discovered the receipt for a $5,000 designer wedding gown. A second gown that Amber had purchased without his knowledge, in addition to the one they had chosen together. "This is too much," Jason said, standing abruptly. "I need some space to think. This isn't just about money, Amber. It's about trust and honesty, the foundation of any marriage." "Jason, wait," Amber cried, jumping to her feet. "It's not what you think. I can explain everything." "I think you've explained enough for one day," he replied, moving toward the door. "I'll call you tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss." As Jason left, Amber rounded on me, her face contorted with rage. "Look what you've done. You've ruined everything." "No, Amber. Your actions ruined things. I just brought them to light." "You've always been jealous of me," she shouted. "You couldn't stand to see me happy, so you had to destroy my wedding." Mom stood up, looking suddenly tired. "Amber, that's enough. Let's go home and talk about this calmly." "Calmly? Are you serious, Lawrence? Just destroyed my wedding and probably my relationship. How am I supposed to be calm?" "By taking responsibility for your actions," I suggested quietly. "By acknowledging that you've been manipulating people who care about you." Amber grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. "This isn't over, Lawrence. You'll regret this." As she yanked the door open and stormed out, Mom lingered behind. For a moment she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, somewhere between anger and uncertainty. "I never thought you would do something like this to your own sister," she said finally. "And I never thought my mother would help my sister manipulate and extort me," I replied. "I guess we're both disappointed." She left without another word, the door closing softly behind her. I stood in the sudden silence of my apartment, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Pain at the family bonds that had been damaged, but also a profound sense of relief at having finally stood up for myself. The worst was likely still to come, but for the first time in years I felt like I was no longer a passive participant in my own family dynamic. I had taken control, set boundaries, and refused to be manipulated any longer. Whatever happened next, that victory couldn't be taken away. 1 week after the confrontation in my apartment, I received a text from Jason: wedding postponed indefinitely. Need to talk. Coffee tomorrow. Say Gloke. I agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe near my office. When I arrived, Jason was already there, looking tired, but somehow more at peace than when I'd last seen him. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down across from him. "I wanted to update you on everything, and to thank you." "Thank me?" I asked, surprised. "I thought you might blame me for the chaos." Jason shook his head. "At first I was angry about the venue cancellation. It seemed extreme. But once I started really looking into our finances and talking honestly with Amber, I realized you did me a huge favor." He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. "After I left your apartment that day, I went home and did something I should have done months ago. I went through all our joint accounts and credit card statements. What I found was disturbing." "How bad was it?" I asked quietly. Amber had been systematically hiding expenses from me. The wedding budget I thought we were working with, she'd exceeded it by nearly $100,000 already, with 3 months still to go before the wedding. She'd opened a credit card in my name without my knowledge. She'd been lying about payments to vendors, claiming things were paid in full when they weren't. He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted just recounting it. When I confronted her, she broke down and admitted everything. She said she felt pressured to have the perfect wedding, that she got caught up in creating an image she thought would impress my family and friends. "And did you believe her?" I asked carefully. Jason sighed. "Partially. I do think there was some social pressure involved. But I also discovered this isn't new behavior for her. She's been living beyond her means for years, using credit cards, loans from friends, and of course money from you." I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. That matches my experience with her. I love Amber, Jason, said, his voice softening. But I can't build a life with someone I can't trust financially. Money issues are one of the leading causes of divorce, and we haven't even made it to the altar yet. So the wedding is off. Postponed officially, but between us, I don't think it's going to happen. We're in counseling. Both couples counseling. And Amber is seeing a financial therapist. She needs to address these behaviors before we can consider moving forward. How's she taking it? Not well, Jason admitted. She's alternating between begging for another chance and blaming everyone else. You, her friends, who set unrealistic expectations. Social media for creating pressure. Everyone except herself. As we continued talking, Jason shared that he'd been in contact with the venue. Through his attorney, he'd managed to negotiate the return of a portion of the deposit based on the manipulation clause and the fact that they'd quickly rebooked the date with another wedding. I made sure the refund went directly to Amber, he explained. I want her to start taking financial responsibility. Our conversation eventually turned to my broader family situation. Since the confrontation, I had received dozens of messages from extended family members, some supportive after hearing the full story, others condemning me for destroying Amber's wedding. Mom had been calling daily, her messages evolving from angry accusations to tearful pleas for reconciliation. I'm taking some time away from the family drama, I told Jason. I've blocked Amber's number for now, and I've told Mom I need space to process everything. That sounds healthy, Jason agreed. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. It took courage to break that pattern. After parting ways with Jason, I spent the next several weeks focused on my work and my well-being. I started seeing a therapist to work through the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during years of family drama. I even joined a hiking group, discovering a passion for outdoor activities that had been dormant since childhood. The distance from my family was both painful and healing. There were moments when I questioned my decision to take such drastic action with the venue cancellation. Had there been another way to address the pattern of manipulation without causing such upheaval? But my therapist helped me recognize that after years of more gentle attempts to establish boundaries, all of which had been ignored or circumvented, perhaps a dramatic break was the only way to effect real change. 3 weeks after my coffee with Jason, I received an email from him with the subject line, "Thought you should know." The body contained only a brief message: Amber and I are officially over. It was the right decision, though not an easy one. Thank you again for opening my eyes. Take care of yourself. I felt a complex mix of emotions reading those words. Relief that Jason had extricated himself from what would likely have been a difficult marriage, sadness for the pain everyone involved was experiencing, and a lingering sense of responsibility. Though my therapist was helping me recognize that I wasn't responsible for the natural consequences of Amber's actions. Around this time, extended family members began reaching out with different perspectives. Cousin Rachel called to apologize for her initial judgment, saying she'd spoken with Jason and now understood the full situation. Uncle Robert sent an email acknowledging that he'd only heard Amber's side of the story and should have reserved judgment. Even Aunt Patricia, who had always been closer to Mom and Amber, sent a text saying simply, "Family is complicated. Let me know if you want to talk." These messages were healing in their way, but the silence from Mom and Amber was both a relief and a wound. I had expected the continued silent treatment from Amber, but Mom's eventual compliance with my request for space surprised me. Perhaps she was finally respecting a boundary, or perhaps she was simply too angry to reach out. Either way, the break gave me time to strengthen my resolve and clarify my thoughts. 6 months after the venue cancellation, I had dinner with a longtime friend who mentioned seeing Jason at a coffee shop with a woman he seemed quite interested in. He looked happy, Lawrence, relaxed in a way he never did with Amber. That night, I received an unexpected call from Aunt Martha, my father's sister, who lived across the country and rarely involved herself in family matters. We had always gotten along well, but our contact was limited to holiday cards and occasional social media interactions. "Lawrence, honey, I hope I'm not calling too late." Her warm voice came through the phone. "Not at all, Aunt Martha. It's good to hear from you." I've been hearing bits and pieces about the situation with Amber and your mother, she said, getting straight to the point in her characteristic way. I wanted to check on you, and, well, to tell you something I think you should know. What's that? I asked, curious. This pattern with your mother and Amber. It's not new. Your mother was the same way with her own family, especially with her younger sister, your Aunt Vivian. I sat up straighter, surprised by this revelation. What do you mean? Your mother was always skilled at manipulating situations to her advantage, particularly financial ones. She did the same thing to her parents that Amber has been doing to you. Constant demands for money, emotional manipulation, when refused, creating situations where people felt obligated to bail her out. As Aunt Martha continued, a picture emerged of a generational pattern I had never been aware of. Mom had learned these behaviors from her own upbringing and had passed them on to Amber. This didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me understand them in a broader context. Why are you telling me this now? I asked when she finished. Because I want you to know that breaking this cycle took courage. Your grandfather never stood up to your mother the way you've stood up to Amber. He enabled the behavior until the day he died, nearly bankrupt from bailing her out repeatedly. You've done something difficult but necessary, and I'm proud of you for it. Those words, I'm proud of you, from a family member landed with unexpected emotional weight. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear, that someone in my family understood and supported my decision. After that conversation, I began actively seeking professional help to process my family history and establish healthier patterns for my future. I joined a support group for people with difficult family relationships, finding comfort in the shared experiences and wisdom of others who had navigated similar waters. Slowly, I was rebuilding my life with stronger boundaries and a clearer sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to my family's approval or demands. The journey wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of family estrangement felt almost unbearable. But there were also days of profound peace, where I recognized that sometimes loving someone means refusing to participate in their unhealthy patterns, even when that refusal comes at a great personal cost. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, I sat at a waterfront restaurant watching sailboats drift across the harbor. My life had found a new rhythm, more peaceful, more authentic, and surprisingly more connected. While my relationship with Mom and Amber remained complicated and distant, other relationships had deepened in ways I hadn't expected. As I sipped my coffee, a familiar figure approached my table. Lawrence, I thought that was you. I looked up to see Jason smiling and looking healthier than I remembered. Jason, good to see you. Would you like to join me? He sat down, ordering a coffee from the passing server. How have you been? Better than I expected, actually. You? Good. Really good. His smile widened. I'm seeing someone new. It's early days, but it's different. Healthier. I'm happy for you, I said, and meant it. What about you and your family? Any reconciliation? I shook my head. Not really. I've had some limited contact with Mom. We met for lunch a couple of months ago. It was tense. I can imagine. She still doesn't fully understand why I did what I did. In her mind, family helps family. Period. The concept of unhealthy financial dependency or manipulation doesn't register. And Amber. Complete radio silence, which is probably for the best right now. From what I hear through family grapevine, she's still struggling financially, but refusing any suggestion of therapy or financial counseling. Jason nodded sympathetically. Some people have to hit bottom before they're ready to change. Our conversation drifted to happier topics. Jason's work on a sustainable housing project, my recent promotion, a hiking trip I was planning for the summer. As we were finishing our coffees, Jason's expression turned thoughtful. You know, I never properly thanked you. What you did was difficult and came at a real personal cost. But you saved me from what would have been a disastrous marriage. More importantly, you stood up for yourself in a way that was long overdue. I appreciate that, I replied. There are still days I question whether I could have handled it differently. We can always find gentler paths in hindsight, but sometimes a clean break is the only way forward. After parting ways with Jason, I walked along the waterfront, reflecting on the journey of the past year. That evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was my mother's sister, Aunt Vivian, whom I hadn't spoken to in years due to a family rift I'd never fully understood. "Lawrence, it's your Aunt Vivian. I hope it's okay that I called." "Of course," I said, surprised. "It's good to hear from you. I heard about what happened with Amber and your mother. Martha told me you know about the history now. How your mother treated me the same way Amber treated you." She mentioned it, yes. "I wanted to tell you personally that I understand what it took for you to stand up to that pattern. I never found the courage to do it myself, and I paid a heavy price for that failure." We talked for nearly 2 hours, Aunt Vivian sharing stories that filled in many blanks from my childhood and helped me understand the family dynamics that had shaped my upbringing. By the end of the call, we had made plans to meet the next time she visited the West Coast. That conversation with Aunt Vivian was a turning point in my healing journey. It helped me see that my decision to break the cycle of manipulation wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about refusing to perpetuate a generational pattern of emotional and financial abuse. The following week, I received a text from Mom asking if we could meet. I agreed, suggesting a neutral coffee shop near my office. When I arrived, Mom was already seated, looking older and more vulnerable than I remembered. We exchanged awkward greetings before she got to the point. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup, "about what happened with Amber's wedding, about our relationship over the years, about patterns." "What kind of patterns?" I asked carefully. "Patterns of behavior, ways of interacting with family." She struggled to find the right words. "Your Aunt Martha suggested I see someone, a therapist." I was offended at first, but eventually I went. "Just a few sessions so far, but..." She trailed off, then looked directly at me for the first time. "The therapist suggested I might have enabled Amber's behavior, that I might have taught it to her in a way." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the manipulation or her role in it, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her before. "That must have been difficult to hear," I said neutrally. "It was. Island." She sighed. "I'm not saying I agree with everything the therapist suggested, but I am trying to understand." "That's all any of us can do," I offered. "Try to understand and do better." "Amber still blames you entirely," Mom admitted. "She refuses to consider any other perspective." "I'm not surprised. She's struggling, Lawrence. Financially, emotionally." I recognized the subtle shift toward the familiar pattern, Mom positioning Amber as a victim in need of rescue. But this time, I was prepared. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope she gets the help she needs to address the underlying issues." Mom seemed taken aback by my response, sympathetic but firm in maintaining boundaries. We talked a bit longer, the conversation remaining civil but distant. As we parted, Mom hesitated before saying, "I miss you in my life, Lawrence." "I miss aspects of our relationship too," I replied honestly. "But if we're going to have a healthy relationship moving forward, it has to be based on mutual respect and appropriate boundaries." She nodded slowly. "I'm trying to understand what that means." It wasn't a resolution, but it was a beginning. A small opening that might, with time and continued effort on both sides, lead to a healthier family dynamic. As for Amber, I had accepted that reconciliation might never come. People can only change when they're ready, and some never reach that point of readiness. My door remained open to the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect, but I no longer expected it or defined my worth by its existence. The most profound lesson I've learned through this journey is that sometimes the most loving action we can take, both for ourselves and for others, is to refuse to participate in unhealthy patterns. Real love isn't about endless giving or self-sacrifice. It's about holding firm boundaries that allow everyone the dignity of facing their own choices and consequences. I've also learned that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about connections based on mutual respect, support, and healthy interactions. Through this difficult period, I've built a chosen family of friends and more distant relatives who offer the kind of unconditional positive regard that was missing in my closest family relationships. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved, even if they can't see it at the time. By refusing to be manipulated, I gave Amber the opportunity to face her own behavior, gave Jason the chance to make an informed decision about his future, and gave myself permission to expect better treatment from the people in my life. If you're facing similar challenges with family manipulation, know that you have every right to protect yourself. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, and the consequences can be painful, but the freedom and self-respect you gain are worth the difficult journey. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've experienced family manipulation or had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones, please share your experiences in the comments. Each story shared helps others feel less alone in their struggles. And if you found value in my journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of personal growth and overcoming family challenges. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no to those who've never heard it before. Take care of yourselves and be kind to each other.